A mysterious cat won't stop crying, and no one knows why, until the vet checks its collar and gasps in shock. What did they discover? This heart-stopping story will leave you speechless. If you love captivating and emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Let us know in the comments what you think happened before the vet's shocking reaction. Dr. Ethan Moore had seen grief in animals before, but never as profound as Luna's. The sleek black cat had been brought to the shelter 3 nights ago, after her owner, Richard Lane, was found dead under mysterious circumstances. Luna refused to eat. She barely moved. She didn't hiss, didn't scratch, just sat in the corner of her kennel, staring at the door as if waiting for someone who would never return. She hasn't touched her food since she got here, the shelter assistant Hannah murmured. It's like she's expecting him to come back. Ethan crouched beside Luna's cage, sliding a small bowl of wet food closer. "Come on, girl, you need to eat," he whispered. But Luna didn't react. She remained motionless, her emerald green eyes locked on the entrance. Ethan's gaze shifted to the old leather collar around her neck. Its edges frayed, the metal tag scratched. Something about it felt off. He reached forward, brushing his fingers against the tag. The moment he touched it, Luna let out a sharp yowl and sprang back, pressing herself against the cold bars of the cage. Ethan froze. His pulse quickened. "She's protecting something," he murmured. Later that night, after the shelter had gone quiet, Ethan returned to Luna's kennel with a different approach. He sat outside the cage, speaking softly. "You miss him, don't you?" he murmured, noting the slight twitch of her ears. "You weren't just a pet to him. You were something more." Luna blinked slowly. Ethan placed a small treat outside her cage. Luna hesitated, then cautiously inched forward. As she lowered her head to sniff, Ethan seized the opportunity. With careful fingers, he reached for the metal tag again, this time turning it over. His breath caught. Instead of a name and phone number, the tag bore 3 deep scratches, almost as if someone had deliberately tried to erase the engraving. But faintly, under the scratches, Ethan could make out the words. "If something happens to me, trust Luna, she knows." A chill ran down his spine. What the hell? The next morning, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Richard Lane had been an investigative journalist, a man known for exposing corruption and criminal enterprises. Looking through online archives, Ethan found Lane's last published article, an exposé on a pharmaceutical giant called Novacor. The article ended abruptly. No follow-up, no final conclusion. "Did they silence him?" Ethan whispered, the weight of the question pressing against his chest. Luna let out a soft chirp beside him as if responding. Something wasn't right, and if Richard had entrusted Luna with something, Ethan needed to find out what. Ethan visited Richard's apartment, which had already been cleared out by authorities. Everything was neat. Too neat. It didn't feel like a place where a man had suddenly died of natural causes. Then he noticed Luna's old cat bed. Beneath it, faint scratch marks lined the wooden floor. Lifting the cushion, Ethan found a tiny slit in the fabric. He reached inside and pulled out a flash drive. His heart pounded. Ethan wasted no time. He plugged it into his laptop and dozens of files popped up. Documents, emails, financial records, all exposing Novacor's illegal drug trials and bribed officials. His breath hitched. Richard hadn't just been investigating Novacor. He had proof. Before Ethan could process it, a shadow passed outside the window. His stomach dropped. Someone had followed him, and now they knew he had the evidence. A loud knock. A sharp knock cut through the silence. Ethan's blood ran cold. A smooth, calculated voice carried through the door. "Dr. Moore, we need to talk." Luna's throat rumbled with a deep, guttural growl. Ethan acted on instinct. Clutching Luna, he bolted toward the fire escape. Just as he reached the window, the front door burst open. Gunshot. Bang! The bullet missed, ricocheting off the metal railing as Ethan leaped onto the fire escape, his heart pounding. Boots thundered behind him. "Hold on, girl," he whispered to Luna as he ran. One thought burned in his mind. Survive. After a narrow escape, Ethan found himself at Richard's old office, the once renowned Lane Investigative Reports. The newsroom was abandoned. Dust lined the desks, but something still felt alive. Then Luna reacted. She leapt onto a bookshelf in the corner and began scratching at the bottom panel. Ethan frowned. Kneeling down, he ran his fingers along the edge. And something clicked. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside was another flash drive. Before he could process it, footsteps echoed outside. They had found him. The lock rattled violently. Ethan had nowhere left to run. The door slammed open. A masked figure stepped inside, gun raised. Handed over. Ethan clenched his fists. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man cocked his head. "Don't be stupid. We know Lane gave you something." Before Ethan could react, Blackwell burst in, gun drawn. "Drop it." The masked man hesitated, just enough time for Luna to leap at his face, claws extended. The man stumbled back, cursing. Bang! A shot rang out, but it missed. Blackwell tackled the man, knocking him to the floor. Ethan snatched the gun and pointed it. "Don't move." Luna sat on the desk, tail flicking, watching victoriously. A week later, Novacor was exposed. Arrests were made. The files Richard had hidden had finally seen the light. And through it all, Luna never left Ethan's side. "You saved us," Ethan murmured, scratching her ears. Luna blinked, as if she understood. Richard Lane had trusted her for a reason. And now, so did Ethan. But just as he thought it was over, a knock at the door. A woman stood outside, her face pale with fear. "I need your help," she whispered. Ethan's breath caught. It wasn't over. The air felt heavy, thick with something Ethan couldn't name. He stared at the woman standing outside his apartment door, pale, trembling, eyes wide with fear. "You're Dr. Moore, aren't you?" Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. "Please, I need your help." Still curled in Ethan's lap, Luna stiffened, her fur bristling, ears flattening. A low, warning growl rumbled from deep within her chest. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Who are you?" The woman swallowed hard. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Carter. I worked with Richard Lane, and if you don't help me, we're both going to die." Ethan hesitated, every nerve screaming at him to shut the door. But something in Evelyn's eyes, something raw, desperate, kept him frozen. And then she whispered, "Richard told me something before he died." Ethan's breath caught. "What?" She pulled a small rusted key from her coat pocket. "He said, if anything happened to him, I needed to find his cat." Luna let out a strange sound, a soft, drawn-out chirp, as if she recognized the words. Ethan took a step back, pulse hammering. "What does that mean?" Evelyn exhaled shakily. Richard wasn't just investigating Novacorp. He was looking into something far worse, a classified project, hidden off the books. He believed it had to do with human trials. Ethan's blood ran cold. "You're saying Novacor was experimenting on people?" Evelyn nodded. "People who disappeared. People nobody would notice." Her voice wavered. "I think Richard found proof." She held up the key. "This belongs to a storage unit. Richard gave it to me before he was killed, but I was too afraid to check it. He told me it held the last piece of the puzzle." Ethan's mind raced. If Richard had gone to such lengths to hide this, then whoever had killed him was still out there. And now, they knew Evelyn had the key. A noise outside made them both freeze. Footsteps, heavy, measured, right outside the door. Ethan turned off the lights. Silence. Then a knock. A different voice this time, calm, calculated. "Dr. Moore," the man called through the door. "We need to talk." Luna let out a low, guttural growl. Ethan's hands tightened into fists. They had found them. Ethan barely breathed. Evelyn was shaking beside him. "Do not open that door," she mouthed. Ethan nodded. Slowly, he grabbed his phone and texted Blackwell. "They found me." The knock came again, this time louder, more forceful. "You have something that doesn't belong to you," the voice said smoothly. "You should hand it over before this gets worse." Ethan's heart pounded. They knew about the key. Luna hissed, her back arching. Ethan grabbed Evelyn's wrist. They had to go. Now. Using the noise from the front door as a distraction, he led her through the apartment's fire escape, Luna tucked in his jacket. By the time the men kicked in the door, Ethan and Evelyn were already gone. They drove in silence, the city lights flashing past them. The storage unit Richard had left behind was located in an abandoned industrial district, far from prying eyes. Evelyn gripped the key so tightly her knuckles turned white. "If we open this, we can't turn back," she whispered. Ethan glanced at Luna, whose eyes remained locked on the road ahead, eerily alert. "They never could," he muttered. They arrived at a dilapidated warehouse complex. The air was thick with dust and decay. Storage Unit 2017 stood at the very end, rusted shut from years of neglect. Evelyn hesitated before sliding the key into the lock. Click. The door groaned as it rolled open. The air inside was ice cold, and then they saw it. A desk covered in papers, boxes stacked high, a laptop with a blinking light, and in the center of the room, a metal table with a body bag on top. Ethan's breath caught. "Oh my God." Evelyn took a trembling step forward. "Richard, what did you find?" Luna leapt from Ethan's arms, sniffing the air. Her ears twitched. She recognized something. A voice emerged from the shadows. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Ethan spun around. A man stepped out of the darkness, his face half lit by the blinking red light of the laptop. His expression? Amused. His eyes? Cold. Calculating. And Evelyn gasped. You're supposed to be dead." The man smirked. "No, Dr. Carter, Richard Lane is dead." A gun clicked. "But unfortunately for you, I'm still very much alive." The air in the storage unit turned electric, thick with tension. Ethan barely had time to react before the gun in the man's hand aimed directly at his chest. Evelyn stood frozen beside him, her breath shallow. "It's impossible," she whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. "You were reported dead. I saw the autopsy report myself." The man smirked. "Reports can be falsified. Bodies can disappear." His finger flexed on the trigger. "Now, I suggest you step away from that table." Luna, still crouched near the desk, let out a low growl, her emerald eyes locked onto the stranger like she knew exactly who or what he was. Ethan's pulse pounded. He had been in dangerous situations before, but this was something else. "You worked for Novacorp, didn't you?" Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "That's why Richard was investigating you." The man chuckled, the sound too casual, too controlled. "Worked?" "No, Dr. Moore," he said smoothly. "I didn't work for them. I was Novacorp." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. The man took a step forward, the dim light of the laptop illuminating his face. "Still don't get it, do you?" he mused. Richard Lane wasn't just digging into a pharmaceutical scandal. He was uncovering something that should never have seen the light of day. He gestured toward the body bag on the metal table. That's why he had to die. Ethan's jaw tightened. His gaze flickered to the body bag. Whatever was inside was the key to everything Richard had died for. Evelyn swallowed hard. "What's in there?" she whispered. The man smirked. "See for yourself." A sick feeling twisted in Ethan's stomach, but he reached out and unzipped the bag. His breath caught. Inside, lying eerily still, was a man's body. But not just any man. Richard Lane. Evelyn let out a strangled gasp, stumbling backward. "No, that's not possible." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. Richard Lane had been cremated. His funeral had been public. His body had never been recovered, only his ashes. Yet here he was, lying right in front of them, intact. "How is this possible?" Ethan rasped, unable to tear his eyes away. He was buried. He was gone. The man leaned against the desk, his amusement growing. "Science is a funny thing, Dr. Moore," he said, tapping the side of his temple. "You'd be surprised what a little genetic engineering and organ regeneration can do." Evelyn's knees nearly buckled. "Oh my God," she whispered. You brought him back?" The man smirked. "Let's just say Richard Lane was too valuable to be left to rot in the ground." Ethan's stomach twisted in horror. "So this is what Novacor was doing," he murmured. "Experimenting on humans, reviving them." The man shrugged. "A dead man tells no tales," he said. "Unless, of course, he doesn't stay dead." Ethan's mind raced. If Richard's body was here, if this was what he had been trying to expose, then everything Novacor had done wasn't just about corporate greed. It was about playing God. Ethan turned back to the body. Richard's skin was pale, but not lifeless. His fingers twitched. Then his eyelids fluttered. Evelyn gasped. "Oh my God," she choked. "He's still alive." The man laughed. "Of course he is." Richard Lane suddenly drew in a ragged breath. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. His lips parted as if trying to speak. Ethan stumbled back, his pulse roaring in his ears. "What the hell did you do to him?" The man tilted his head, his expression one of amusement, as if watching a grand experiment unfold. "We brought him back," he said simply. "And now, Dr. Moore, we're going to see if his mind is still intact." Ethan barely had time to react before Richard's eyes snapped open. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. Richard's eyes, once sharp, filled with fire, now looked empty. He let out a hoarse breath, his fingers twitching. "Luna." Ethan's heart stopped. The cat, who had remained eerily still throughout, suddenly moved forward, cautiously sniffing Richard's outstretched hand. She let out a soft, questioning chirp. "See?" the man mused. "Even your cat recognizes him." Richard's gaze flickered weakly toward Luna, then to Ethan. His throat worked, but his voice came out strained. "They're coming," he rasped. Ethan's blood ran cold. "Who?" Richard's breath quickened. Panic filled his eyes. His fingers clutched Ethan's wrist with inhuman strength. They know, they're watching." A sudden alarm blared through the warehouse, cutting him off. Red lights flashed, sirens screamed. The man's expression darkened. "Well," he muttered, "it seems we have company." Ethan barely had time to process the words before gunfire erupted outside. "Move!" Ethan shouted. Evelyn grabbed Richard's arm, trying to help him sit up. "We can't leave him." The man scoffed. "You don't have a choice. They won't let you walk out of here alive." The warehouse shook as an explosion rattled the walls. Luna hissed, leaping onto Ethan's shoulder just as a squad of armed men stormed through the entrance. The man standing beside them raised his hands in surrender. "Dr. Moore," one of the masked figures called out. his voice distorted. "Hand over the asset." Ethan's stomach dropped. Richard wasn't a person to them. He was an asset. Luna let out a sharp yowl, her claws digging into Ethan's shoulder. "And Richard?" Richard turned to Ethan with pleading eyes. "Don't let them take me," he whispered. Ethan made his choice. He ran. Gunfire exploded behind them as Ethan, Evelyn, and Richard disappeared into the darkness. The truth wasn't just buried. It was alive, and it was running for its life. The sound of gunfire tore through the night as Ethan, Evelyn, and Richard sprinted through the abandoned warehouse district. The air smelled of burnt metal and damp concrete, their footsteps echoing off the crumbling buildings. Behind them, the armed men pursued relentlessly. Not mercenaries, not police, but something far more terrifying. They weren't here to kill. They were here to retrieve their asset. "Richard, keep moving," Ethan panted, gripping Richard's arm as they darted around a rusted shipping container. I don't think I can," Richard gasped, stumbling. His body was weak but unnaturally resilient, his very existence a defiance of death. His skin was pale, but his eyes, his mind, were beginning to clear. "You can," Evelyn urged. "We just need to get you out of here." A bullet whizzed past Ethan's ear, striking the metal beside him. Sparks flew. They were closing in. Then, Luna, still perched on Ethan's shoulder, let out a piercing yowl. The cat twisted suddenly, leaping from Ethan's shoulder and landing atop a nearby stack of crates. She stared at something ahead. Something none of them could see yet. Ethan trusted her. He always had. "This way!" he shouted, leading them toward where Luna had gone. More gunfire, more running. The night felt endless. Then, suddenly, a massive floodlight switched on, blinding them. A voice rang out. "Drop your weapons, hand in the air." Ethan's heart sank. They had been trapped. But then he saw them. Blackwell. And a full team of federal agents. Blackwell stepped forward, his gun raised. The armed men hesitated, realizing they were outmatched. "You're done," Blackwell growled. "Lower your weapons, now." For a moment, silence. Then, the leader of the mercenaries clicked his earpiece. "Extraction compromised," he muttered. And then, like ghosts, they vanished. The armed men slipped into the shadows, disappearing before Blackwell's agents could fire. "They won't be gone for long," Evelyn whispered. Blackwell turned to Ethan. "You've got some explaining to do, Doc." Ethan exhaled, shaking. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me," Blackwell muttered. Ethan stepped aside. Richard stood there, breathing, alive, his eyes now fully aware. Blackwell's face went pale. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "Richard Lane?" The journalist gave a weak, bitter smile. "I suppose I should say, long time no see." Ethan turned to Blackwell. "We have proof. Everything. The experiments, the cover-ups, Novacor's illegal trials. We can finally bring them down." Blackwell nodded grimly. "Then let's end this." The next 48 hours were a storm of revelations. With Richard Lane alive, the story broke worldwide, one of the greatest cover-ups in modern history. Novacorp's secret research was exposed, their connections with high-ranking officials dragged into the light. Arrests were made. The CEO of Novacor disappeared overnight. But his empire? It was over. And then, the real moment came. Ethan, Evelyn, and Richard stood in front of a wall of reporters, their microphones buzzing. Richard, a man who had been declared dead, spoke to the world. "They thought they could erase me," he said, his voice steady. "They thought they could erase the truth." He paused, looking down at Luna, curled at his feet, her green eyes watching everything. "But the truth finds a way. And this time, it would never be buried again." Days passed. The world had changed. Novacor's empire was shattered. The people responsible were in prison or in hiding. Ethan sat outside his clinic, the weight of it all finally lifting from his shoulders. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. Beside him, Luna stretched lazily in the sun. "You saved us, you know," he murmured. Luna simply blinked slowly, the way cats do when they trust someone completely. Ethan smiled. Then a familiar voice spoke. "You're still talking to that cat, huh?" Ethan turned. Richard stood there, healthier, stronger, alive. He smiled. "She's smarter than all of us, Lane." Richard chuckled. "I believe it." Luna let out a soft, knowing purr. She had guarded the truth. She had led Ethan to the answers. She had saved them all. And now, at last, she could rest. And so, the mystery that had started with Luna's cries had finally come full circle. What seemed like an ordinary cat's grief had led to the unraveling of a dangerous conspiracy, exposing the dark secrets that powerful people had tried to bury. Richard Lane was alive, Novacor had fallen, and justice had been served. Yet through it all, one thing remained constant. Luna, the cat who had held the key to everything. As Ethan sat on the clinic's front steps, Luna curled beside him, her emerald eyes reflecting the fading afternoon light. He scratched her ears, smiling softly. "You really are something special, aren't you?" Luna purred, content at last. But just as Ethan closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of peace, his phone buzzed. A message from Blackwell. "There's more. We need to talk." Ethan's stomach tightened. He looked down at Luna, who lifted her head, ears twitching as if she already knew. Maybe the fight wasn't over after all. "What do you think? Was this truly the end? Or is there more to uncover?" Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this gripping story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Share this video with friends who love thrilling mysteries, because sometimes the truth is closer than we think. Subscribe now and stay tuned for more incredible stories.